let's get the latest on this debt ceiling stuff, and we are joined by Senator Roy Blunt this afternoon. Senator, how are you? Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Mark, I'm good. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing okay. Do we know if there's any kind of movement in these negotiations?
I don't know that we do. I think we went through this silly exercise this week of coming back instead of looking at Missouri River flooding or whatever else need to be looked at during that scheduled work period at home because the president was just simply playing politics last week with his 13-year-old daughter gets her homework done. So, why aren't the House and Senate here working? So we had two votes this week, Mark. One vote was to compel the senators who weren't here on Tuesday to attend, to have the sergeant at arms search them out and attend, and they may have been the ones that had the best judgment, because the only other vote we had this week was a cloture on a sense of the House resolution, not even a vote, but a cloture vote on a sense of the Senate resolution of whether millionaires were paying enough taxes or not. So, there's way too much of that going on and not nearly enough effort to get a solution to this problem. Just earlier this afternoon, Senator Paul and Senator Lee from Utah and I, along with 18 others, announced that we were co-sponsoring a bill that would raise the debt limit. But to raise the debt limit, you'd also have to agree to cut discretionary spending, set caps on all other spending, and have a balanced budget amendment. And that may not be the only thing that I would vote for, but I'd certainly be willing to do all of those things. Definitely the worst thing than not increasing the debt limit would be increasing the debt limit and not changing behavior, because the current behavior is unacceptable.
Well, we should point out that first of all, I think this gets lost, by the way, Senator. I think you'd agree with me in the argument that at first that's what the president wanted. He wanted a clean bill, right, with just an increase in the debt limit with no conditions whatsoever. The Republicans said, wait a minute, we're not going to allow you to do that. Now, what you just described here in the bill that you're supporting, is that what has become commonly referred to as cut, cap, and balance?
Exactly. Cut would be to cut the non-defense discretionary spending, in the case of this bill, back to the 2006 levels. And I was running into almost nobody in 2006 that was saying you weren't spending enough money. The cap would be to then set caps, which would generally be increases on the mandatory, the program side of the budget, the side of the budget that you get the money if you qualify for the program, like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, the states, getting money from Medicaid, but set increasing caps, but know what those caps are. And then balance would be the balanced budget amendment that requires the government to do what every family in America is ultimately required to do, which is to get their income equal to their outgo.
And most states, too.
And most states, that's exactly right.
Now, the founding member, we hear from the president a lot. He mentions Alice Rivlin's name, and she was on the Deficit Commission. She's the founding member of the Congressional Budget Office. She said that 18% in this time of GDP is not feasible because you have all these, and this is one of the big problems that we have to contend with. You have this huge generation of baby boomers moving into retirement, and they're living longer. The medical costs are getting higher. So she argues, and others argue, that's not possible, that these are too steep of cuts at this time.
What does she argue that is possible?
Well, that's a very good question.
I think that's the question right there, and she actually may be right. In the 40 years from World War II, from the 40 years before 2008 and before 2009, including 2008, the government spent 20.6% of GDP. And you could argue that, well, maybe it needs to be 1% higher than that 40-year average because of baby boomer retirement. So let's let somebody put 21.6 on the table, or 20.6, the 40-year average. The problem with Alice Rivlin and Barack Obama and others is that they can always find a problem with anybody else's solution, but they don't have a solution of their own. And who can't do that? I mean, that's the easiest thing in the world to do. Let's see them put something on the table.
Well, I pointed this.
I'd like 18%. And the reason 18%, that's how much money we've collected during that 40-year period of time. That's where that number comes from, and the difference, it was probably more like 18.3, and the difference in collecting 18.3 and spending 20.6 accumulated over 40 years to a $10 trillion deficit. And then this president has increased that number by 35% in less than 35 months, in 30 months. And that's the difference in this moment and any other. We're spending way too much of the capacity of the country to produce goods and services. We're now at about a quarter, 25% of GDP, instead of the traditional average of 20.6. And we're just not doing the things that need to be done.
I know, but here's what we hear from the president, and this is at the crux of the argument nationally. Senator, the reason is because people like you, when you were in the House, you supported these ridiculous Bush tax cuts, which let the wealthy off the hook, and if we just repeal those, we'd have enough money to move forward.
Well, 38% of the taxpayers in the country, 10% of the taxpayers in the country pay 70% of the income taxes now. I said on the floor of the House today, in the Senate today, why don't we just let them pay 100%? If millionaires aren't paying enough, why don't we just let them pay 100%? Why don't we just let 90% of the taxpayers of America not pay anything? The richest 10% are already paying 70% of all the taxes. Why don't we just let them pay all the taxes? And why don't we let the other 90% of the people not care at all what the tax rates are, or really have a stake in that part of the, if you don't care, you
better be careful. Harry Reid will go for that, I think.
He very well might.
Yeah.
And you don't care about what you don't, you care about what you invest in. And if you have no investment in the income tax system, you really don't care about it. And you don't care how high it is for the people that are out there investing money and creating jobs. And even Bill Clinton said yesterday, this is no time to increase taxes. He said maybe you increase taxes after the economy recovers. Now, I'm not for that either. I think we tax plenty high right now, and I'd be for reducing the rates, not increasing the rates. But even Bill Clinton is saying publicly, don't increase taxes now. And if the president wanted to increase taxes, Mark, as you and I have talked about before, he had huge majorities for 2 years in the House and the Senate, and they didn't increase taxes then.
Well, the other question would be, if increasing taxes is really the answer, why isn't Senator Reid moving legislation forward in the Senate? I don't believe he's doing that, right? He didn't call a vote on. He didn't call a vote on that this week.
No, and the thing we do have on the floor to bring back next week is this silly sense of the Senate resolution that millionaires don't pay enough taxes. There's no law. It's not about to become anything. It's just the sense of the Senate. In fact, I was on the floor with Ron Johnson, the new senator from Wisconsin, today, and our budget leader, Mr. Sessions from Alabama, and Ron Johnson said, this isn't the sense of the Senate. This resolution is the nonsense of the Senate. And that just about said it as well as it could be said.
Yeah, but they're doing that because they think it may very well play well with some of the American people, right?
Oh, that's exactly why they're doing it. And you're trying to get class envy rather than deal with the real problems. It's like this accelerated depreciation on business-owned aircraft, corporate jets. If you did what the president wants to do and change it to 7 years of depreciation instead of 5, you'd over 10 years, I think you'd save $3 billion. Yeah. We're borrowing $4 billion a day. And his solution is over 10 years to come up with about 16 hours of borrowing. Just craziness.
But let's talk about the politics on the other side, because both parties play politics. So in order to reach some sort of resolution here that's successful in achieving the goals of not spending as much money and reducing the deficit, the president has to show leadership. He's got to stop playing games. Do the Republicans also have to give on the revenue side? Not a tax increase, but on some of the loopholes. Is that going to be part of the equation?
Oh, I don't know. I don't intend to give on it. Now, for a lower tax rate, I'm always for looking at the tax code to get a lower tax rate, but I'm not for raising taxes. If the end result of this is that you have raised taxes, if you eliminate depreciation on corporate aircraft, you're likely to put some corporate aircraft a guy who makes airplanes in Wichita, Kansas, out of work. that's why that is in there, to try to encourage people to buy a plane not made by a millionaire, but made by a guy who's a union member who punches a card every day and shows up to make a corporate aircraft. If you increase that tax, likely to be some number of less planes that are sold. So I just don't think it's time to do that, and let's see what they come up with. It's always a bad idea to start saying what you won't do instead of what you will do. But what I will do is vote to increase the debt limit if we have a balanced budget amendment and caps on spending, and get our discretionary, our non-military discretionary spending back down to some reasonable level.
And the battle goes on, Senator.
And the battle goes on.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Talk again. Thanks for the time this afternoon.
Hey, buddy. Good to talk to you.